Hello children, welcome to this new session on reading NCERT science textbooks. Now we're in classes 9 and 10. You are at a stage when you have mastered enough language skills and reading skills to read and understand your textbooks on science. But for many children, these books present certain difficulties. Today we'll discuss what is the nature of that, why they face the difficulties, and how to solve them. So let us continue. Now let us consider the nature of the science textbooks. These books are not about stories, the stories normally that we find in our literature readers. They also don't contain narrations of events that we normally find in our history books. They're about the physical world that we live in. They're about the world of air, water, plants and animals, the roads, the buildings. They're about the planets, the stars, the sun, the moon. So these books are about the physical environment. That's why they have their own characteristics. They are factual in nature. The statements of the textbooks present facts before us, and they don't present any opinions or emotions of the characters that we normally find in our stories. And their purpose is to inform us. That's what they describe and explain. And the content in the books are organized very systematically in the form of topics and subtopics and further details. The writer here presents all these facts and the content in a variety of modes. In our stories, normally we find paragraphs, words, sentences, and some pictures here and there. But in your science textbooks, besides the words and sentences, which are arranged in paragraphs, we find other features, other modes of communication of the content. They are like the photos, videos, diagrams, graphs, charts, symbols. All of them are used by the author to present facts. And as a reader, you are supposed to translate information from one mode to another. That means you are supposed to present facts which are given in a paragraph in the form of a graph or a diagram. So that's why you may face some difficulties here. Your textbooks contain other features which are called text features, like the tables of content, major headings, glossary, footnotes and indexes. And they have been given by the author, deliberately used by the writer to move through the content. So they enable you to understand the presentation of the information. That's why you are supposed to use them. Now you have to learn about the basic features and the language of your science textbooks. So why should you do that? In learning science, or for that matter any subject, besides learning the content, you have to learn the language of communication. That means while learning science, you'll have to learn the content, of course. At the same time, you have to learn how that content is communicated. Your science books are written in English, but the English that you find in your books is different from the one that you find in your other books, the books of your literature reader or your social science. Even the English that you find here is different from the English that you use in your daily life. So that's why it is an English of a special variety and you are supposed to learn it. Now you are a learner of science and you are going to become a scientist. You are a growing scientist. And in your life later, you'll be reading more and more on science. You'll be reading a lot of writings on science to increase your knowledge. That's why you have to learn the language of science. As a scientist, you'll be communicating with others. You'll communicate your own ideas, your own findings to other scientists. And that's why you'll be using the language of science. And of course, unless you learn it properly, how can you communicate in your language? But at the present time, your textbooks are like your personal teachers. And you have to understand your teacher, which is your textbook. And to do that, you have to understand the language of the textbook. Otherwise, you cannot get the benefit of having a textbook with you. That's why you have to learn the language of science. Finally, you can't depend upon others to teach you. You can't depend upon a teacher, class teacher, your subject teacher always. You should be an independent learner. The moment you go out of schools and colleges, there won't be teachers anymore with you. You'll be your own teacher. That's why you should become an independent learner. You should have all those knowledge and skills to learn independently from the books. That's why you have to learn the science books and the medium of communication in the science books. Now let us see why the children face difficulties while reading the science textbooks. The chapters here are, of course, about the familiar world that you live in, but the chapters contain concepts and theories and ideas. Many of them are abstract. That's why the very content of the science books present difficulties. Besides that, the language of science poses certain problems for the children. It is a challenge for the comprehension because of the vocabulary and the sentences. The language of science is a special variety of the language. Your books are written in English, and the English that is used in science books is different from the English that you find in your literature reader or in your history books. The language of science is different from the language that we use outside in our daily life. So that's why it is a special variety of the language, and we have to learn it. Unless we learn it properly, we'll face difficulties. Your books are written in English, and as you know, this language is not your mother tongue. It is not a common language that we use in our daily lives. It is a foreign language for all of us. That's why if you do not learn English well, you'll face problems while reading the books of science. That's why you have to learn English well. The nature of the language used in science books is technical. Many technical specialist words are used here by the writer. And the words are unique to science only. That means you won't find them in other books or in our daily lives. And this language is abstract. There are special grammatical features for expressing the abstract ideas and concepts, and they create the problem. Here you'll find noun groups. That means one noun with a number of adjectives. There are long sentences containing a lot of nouns, verbs, adjectives. That's why the sentences appear to be dense in nature. There is a lot of density. And there are many pre and post modifiers. That means nouns are preceded by adjectives and also followed by many modifiers. And that adds to the complexity. And in the sentences that you find in the science books, more number of content words are presented. And that's why they present the difficulties. And as I have already said, there are variety of modes of presentation of the text. There are words and visual symbols and diagrams. That's why they pose problems of the children, and something is to be done about this. The language of science presents a special kind of difficulty, and when you think of the language of science, we normally think of the words. The words of science constitute the vocabulary, and they present a kind of challenge for the children. What is the reason for that? It is because of their nature. Let us see. Many of the words that we find in science books are new. They are new because we don't find them when we use English outside in our daily lives. We don't find them in our social science books. These words are special to this particular subject. That's why they are new and we see them for the first time. That's why they present the difficulties. Then there are many such words that we find here which are familiar to us, but they have new meanings here, means familiar words with new meanings attached to them. Words like properties, tendency, force, work, energy, etc. are very common, they are known to us, but when you find them here in science books, their meanings are different. That's why they cause confusion for us. There is another factor. It is called nominalization. And nominalization means formation of nouns out of verbs, adjectives, and other nouns. And we find numerous examples in our science books. Here are a few. Let us take the example of compressibility. It's a long word, but this word has been deliberately coined or formed out of a shorter word called compress. From compress, the word compressibility has been formed. It has been done by the author to express certain meanings. So the main purpose of the author is to express a lot of content using small number of words. That's why they coin or form such new nouns out of other nouns or the verbs and adjectives by adding affixes. Here in compressibility, suffixes has been used with the verb compress, and this new word has been formed. Similarly, other words are the conversion, vaporization, sublimation, deposition, absorption, etc. You might find and look at many more. Besides that, you'll find sentences with more number of content words as compared to function words. Content words refers to the nouns, verbs, adjectives and adverbs. These words are called content words. And the rest of the words are called function words. Like your articles, they are function words. Content words carry the meaning, they carry the content. And the function words help the content words to frame sentences to convey the meaning. So this is the difference. Content words are adjectives, adverbs, nouns and verbs. They are used to express the content, and the function words help them in expressing the content. Here is a sentence given below. There are 16 words. Out of them, only few are function words. The rest and the majority of them are content words. So in the science books, you find similar sentences with large number of content words. That's why we find these sentences as dense. They carry a lot of content. So the content load is more. That's why we find it difficult. When we find such sentences for the first time, we find the difficulties here. We may not find such sentences in our stories. So the language of science is something different. It is something special to this particular subject. That's why they present the difficulties. Then the sentences of science books are complex in nature. The structure is complex. There are long phrases of nouns with a number of adjectives. One particular noun before which we find many adjectives, and it is followed by also many adjectives. That is deliberately done to express a lot of content, and it is special to the science books. And there are long complex sentences with numerous clauses joined together, and that's why the sentences appear to be long and they pose the difficulties. So to unpack the meaning out of such sentences, you have to learn how to analyze the compound and complex sentences. You have to learn to analyze the noun phrases with so many adjectives. It is the very nature of the language used in science, the nature of sentences, the phrases, causes the problem for the children. But learning about these sentences and such phrases will ultimately solve the problem. We have already discussed about the problems faced by the children while reading the science books. Now let us see the solutions. Your science books are written in English. English is the medium of these books, and all of you know it is not the mother tongue for most of you. It is an unfamiliar language as far as the real life is concerned. That's why it creates the problem. The very medium of the books creates the problem. So you have to learn English well in order to understand these books. And the variety of English that is used in science books also creates a special kind of problem. It is unlike the English that we find outside. The specialist vocabulary, sentence structure that we have already seen create the problem when we go through the science books. So the English found in the science textbooks causes the problem. So that's why you can request your teachers to teach you English well. And your science teachers can help you in this. You request them to use English while teaching science to you. Tell them that every teacher is a language teacher. Even if a teacher teaches science, he or she has to teach that language, the language used in science. And all of you know that by simply listening to a particular language like English, you'll improve your listening ability. The moment you listen, you learn the language. That's the way we learn the language. We learn by just listening. If you don't listen to English, then how can you learn the language? So that's why, please tell your teachers, request them to teach you in English only. They are not helping you if they are trying to explain the concept of science in any other language. They are causing a kind of harm to you. They are trying to help you in explaining the concepts, but not learning the language of science. So that's why I'll request all of you to tell your teachers of science to teach you in English. Initially, at the beginning, you may find some difficulties, but gradually, slowly, you learn the language. It will become a familiar language to all of you in your classes, and that way it will become easier, and that way you learn unconsciously. Then you have to learn how to comprehend the texts of science. Your language teachers, your English teachers, and your science teachers will help you in understanding, in comprehending the textbooks of science. There are many skills involved in it. So you have to learn those skills. Then you have to improve your vocabulary of science. Learning a language is basically primarily learning the words of the language. So vocabulary, that means the words of the language, is to be learned. Unless you do that, you cannot understand that particular language. So if at all you want to understand the language of science, you have to improve your vocabulary of science. So you have to learn the words. I'll help you in this later. The words and the sentences of the science books are longer. They appear complex. So you have to learn to analyze them and unpack the meanings of the words and sentences. That is a skill that is to be taught to you. You can ask your teachers to help you in this. Then the chapters of science are organized in a special way. There is a principle behind this. So you have to learn about the organization, how the content of the chapters are presented, what is the systematic organization behind this is to be discovered by you, and you have to learn. You'll find many paragraphs. These are very common things when you see the chapter of science. The paragraph is the base of the organization. So you have to learn about the nature of a paragraph, what is the topic sentence in a paragraph, how the topic is elaborated and described or explained in the paragraph. So you have to learn about the organization of a paragraph, how ideas are expressed in a particular paragraph. So the principle of paragraph organization is to be taught to you, and you have to learn about it. So you can tell your English teachers to help you in this. As I have already discussed earlier, there are many text features which are deliberately used by the writer of the chapters of the science books. So you have to know about their functions, their use, how they express meaning, and you have to learn how to discover the meanings behind them. So that's why you have to learn about the text features. They are to be taught to you, and you have to learn about them. And if you do that, then comprehension of the chapters of the science books will become very easy. And for that, you have to read your text regularly. Don't be afraid of the textbooks or the chapters of the language. Start reading. You're all intelligent children. Simply, it's a matter of reading and practice. The more you read, the easier it becomes. And if you don't read, it will become more and more difficult. So that's why practice will make you perfect. But for that, you should have the desire. And I guarantee, if you read more, the easier it will become. The language will become more and more familiar. And gradually you will find the language of science is no more difficult. For that, you have to ask your teachers for help. Both your language teachers, your teachers of English, and the teachers of science. Tell your teachers of science that they are also language teachers. Besides teaching the content, they are supposed to teach you the language in which the content of science is expressed. If they are simply teaching the content and not the language, then they are not helping you fully. They are helping you half, and they have to help you fully. That's why request them to teach the content at the same time the language of science, and gradually you'll become familiar with the language of science, the skills of comprehension, and of course English. And thus ultimately the books will not be difficult, and all the difficulties will evaporate slowly. Wish you all the best. Thank you.